Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and our guest today is Pete Martin. He's the CEO of Votem, and this one guy may have more impact on your life than anyone else you know, so stick around.
Welcome to Your Mark on the World, bringing you another changemaker with champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
This episode is made possible via the support of our sponsors, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd. Pete, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Devin. Wow, that's quite an intro. Thank you. I've got some big shoes to fill here, I think.
Well, we live in a time when people are really starting to get nervous about elections. It's a super politically charged argument. It's painful. There's questions about Russian meddling in our national election here in the United States. There is clear and I don't want to call it rampant, but certainly great evidence of voter fraud in other countries. We send from all around the developed world. We send observers to almost every developing world election to see if they can't gather enough evidence to determine if the election is legit. And sometimes you'll see crazy things, right? Many more people voting than are in the country eligible to vote. I mean, stuff happens. And so fixing that seems so overdue. It has seemed like since the advent of the internet, we should have been able to vote online. You're making this happen. Holy cow, very exciting stuff. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on a couple of things you just mentioned. We had two extraordinary events this year as well, globally. One in Kenya, where the election was overturned because of suspicion of fraud. It had to go to the Supreme Court, much like we did in Florida, right, back in 2000. And then even more crazy was the vote in Venezuela. And what was unprecedented, this has never happened before, but the voting systems vendor, the random machines for the Venezuela election, shortly after Maduro announced the results to the world that he won, they came out a couple of days later and said, actually, the counts from the machines are different off by a million votes than what he announced. So this is a big problem. It needs to be solved globally. And so this is just great to talk about this stuff.
Well, it is huge. So tell us about your technology, your solution.
Yeah, so it's really, we're combining two technologies together. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit is some future stuff. All this is not working as I'm going to talk about today, but we're within about 12 months of getting this all together. And we're kind of working our way there. But the big part of this, the foundation of our platform, which we call cast iron, is blockchain technology, or distributed ledger technology. And it doesn't really matter what it is per se, except that there's a couple of characteristics around blockchain and distributed ledger that makes this an incredible technology that didn't exist, frankly, more than 8 years ago, that makes it perfect for voting. And let me talk about a couple of those characteristics. The first one, you mentioned observers in elections. So through this technology, you have the ability to independently verify every single transaction that comes in. In our case, it's a vote, an electronic vote. So on our platform, we can have independent parties that frankly don't trust each other. So for instance, each political party, each candidate, actually observers, the ones that you would call in Pakistan, Afghanistan, oversee election, we've talked to them about having what's called a node on our platform, and they will validate mathematically, irrefutably, every vote that comes in real time. That technology has never existed before. At the same time, we talk a lot about, there's a bit of a movement back towards paper because of this threat of nation states meddling with our elections, and that feels safer to people. And lots of states in the US and lots of places around the country are still using paper ballots. The issue with that is, as a voter, right, you go cast that vote, you put it in the ballot box, you run it through the scanner, you have no idea whether that vote was actually cast, A, as you intended, and then B, counted as you intended, right? You have no verification. With this technology called blockchain, we have the ability to give you, the voter, the ability to irrefutably know that A, your ballot was actually cast as you intended it, and then B, more importantly, that it was counted as you intended it, and irrefutably, and give you that confidence that it went all the way through. So, the idea about fraud or even suspicion that maybe your vote wasn't counted, we can eliminate all that with this technology.
This is really exciting. And I just, I'm almost to the point of giddy thinking about the impact of this, if only because it means I can vote from my phone or from my home computer, and it will be so much easier than the paper mail it back ballots that you wonder, do they get lost, et cetera, and all the other scenarios that are going on.
Yep.
But I have a big worry, Pete.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you the hard question here, and I hope you'll forgive me, but the premise of blockchain is this immutability, this inherent security that it's unalterable.
Correct.
And yet, billions of dollars worth of cryptocurrencies built on blockchain have been stolen. How do you assure governments, the audience today, me, how do you ensure everyone that you will in fact have the cast iron lockdown vote that works the way you propose?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you brought that up because this comes up quite frequently, right? So the first thing I'm going to say is the fundamental blockchain networks, so Ethereum or Bitcoin, the network itself has never been hacked. And the whole crypto market value is about $400 billion. So it's worth hacking that entire network, right? What's been hacked and the money that's been lost are individual either exchanges or wallets, okay? So the difference is, you can either hack the interbank network, if you will, or a single bank or single account, right? And those are the things that have been hacked. So we're very confident that we can build this distributed network that is, I'll never say unhackable, but that is fairly immune to compromise. And the biggest difference with blockchain than a lot of other software technologies is if something has been compromised, you know it immediately because it's all math-based and the math literally doesn't add up, okay? The second thing I would say is blockchain's not a panacea. And we never talk to elections officials about, hey, this is unhackable or this solves all the problems. We're using a lot of other technology in addition to blockchain to make sure that we can identify any compromise. And there's some really old-fashioned things we're doing right now. Like there's a big concern about phishing, right? So if I send you the wrong URL to go vote on, right, you just either thought you cast your vote or you cast it for somewhere else, right? So we're doing some very old-fashioned things. We may send you a card with a scratch-off note with your PIN, with the URL. We may send some stuff through the mail. So this whole platform is going to evolve over time. And we're going to combine a bunch of different technologies to make sure that the fundamental platform is secure, number one, and then number two, that all of these other threats that hackers are pretty smart about figuring their way around, that we can cover those off as well.
Now, you've already started doing some voting on your platform. That is, you've started to manage votes, elections, some public and some private. Tell us a little bit about the elections you've already handled.
Yeah, so to date, we've tallied over almost 8.5 million votes at this point. I think we're at 8.3 something. And those are all private elections. And we'll talk about those in just a second. We acquired a company back in early 2016, right before the US primary elections, that was non-blockchain based, that gave us the ability to serve military and overseas voters for online voting. And the elections business is actually you're not tallying votes, you're actually just marking a ballot in a secure way. So that's what we did through the 2016 election cycle and special election last year. We're in the process of essentially replacing that platform and the underlying back part of that platform with blockchain. And we'll be in a position later this year to be able to go run some of those same customers in statutory elections on blockchain, which nobody in the world has actually done to date.
Very cool. And where do you see your biggest market opportunity?
Yeah, so when we think about the voting market, there's really three voting markets. There are public elections, like we think about a typical government election, voting for president, vice president, whatever. Then you have private elections, which are labor unions, private associations, fan voting that we've done, and all kinds of iterations of that. And then there's actually proxy voting, which we're staying out of that market for the time being. But these are three pretty big markets, and they're distinctly different. So the big market opportunity clearly is in public elections. So we want to be in a position where we can run a national election online and through mobile phones. It's going to take a while to get there. So our path to getting there is to spend a lot of time supporting private elections. And many of those private elections are also regulated. So for instance, labor unions, you have to run elections in a very specific way according to the Department of Labor, or they will decertify the results. So they're not as regulated as public elections, but there are very strict rules around some of these. And we're proving out the concept. We're making sure this thing is locked down and secure. And we're working our way towards this slow migration towards online voting. And we don't think that maybe someday, but for the foreseeable future, online voting is not going to be the only way you vote, right? Even in the states that have gone to, for instance, 100% mail-in ballots in the US, there's 3 states. Most of them still have a service center that if you're uncomfortable sending your ballot through the mail, you can go down to the library and you can go vote in person with a ballot. So we think for the foreseeable future, our platform, our solution will be another channel, right, in addition to other ones, until we all get comfortable that we can make sure this is super secure and uncompromisable.
Terrific. Now, Pete, you've been at this for a while. You've had a long and successful career. You had a great exit, sold your consulting business to KPMG. What's the most important lesson you've learned over your career?
Wow. So I think what serves me really well in this capacity is I spent most of my professional career in and around SAP, which are these big business systems that literally run companies. And these are massive projects. There's a high degree of risk. Security is everything. Data quality is everything. And people don't like change. And we're operating in an industry that has some entrenched competitors with lots of fear, right, around all the things that you mentioned. And this is going to be a long slog. And I think that background coming from that environment where we were literally ripping one system out and replacing another one, and I met people that were doing, folks that were doing things the same way for 25 years. We're going to wake up one day and do it completely different. It's a big deal, and it's very difficult. And so I think that was, those were my combat duty stripes that I got to kind of enter into this industry.
That's great. Now, you could be doing anything. Obviously, you're a super smart guy, but what you've chosen to do has the potential to really benefit the world in a tremendous way. I mean, whether we're talking about Kenya or the United States, this is a big deal. The impact for good is huge. But it also it's full of challenges. And so I wonder why you chose this particular project.
So I think I only half joke about this, but I think the more I think about it, I think something got stuck. So I'm going to go back to my senior year in high school, all right? And I ran for class president. And there's 365 kids in my class. I think 200 and some people voted. And they count the votes manually, not unlike we do today in in the U.S. and most of the world. And I won by 1 vote, okay? So they said it's too close, we have to do a recount. So they counted them again, and it was a tie. So they said, oh, geez, well, we have to count it. And so there was something about that experience that I think stuck with me. So now fast forward to I sell the business. And over the course of that, I've always developed a heck of a passion for politics and policy and global affairs. And I was elected to the student government in college and all this kind of stuff. So when I sold the business, I was very seriously thinking about getting into politics at the state level. I'm from Ohio. And my friends know me, said, you're a classic entrepreneur, right? You hate bureaucracy, make sure it's what you really want to do. So I went to a conference thinking about, having this in the back of my head with a guy by the name of Peter Diamandis. And one of the workshops they had us do was, he said, look, you're all smart business people, you know how to create wealth, start businesses, sell businesses, but focus on impact. So take out a blank piece of paper and write down on a piece of paper what you're going to do before you die that will positively impact 1 billion people in the world, okay? So I pull out this blank piece of paper and I stare at it for probably 5 minutes, and I unconsciously wrote down mobile voting. And the more I looked at these 2 words, the more I said, this is kind of a, why has nobody done this, right? This is crazy. This solves so many problems, right? It solves access, on and on and on, right? And so the more that I looked at those 2 words, literally, the more excited I got. It's a perfect intersection for me. I've been in technology my whole career. I love politics, but now I'm not square in the center of it. And most importantly, huge social impact. And as I sat there looking at these 2 words and thinking through this, I reflected on one of my best friends is in the Marine Corps, and he would tell me stories about how the Marines would provide the security for some of these emerging third world countries that was running a democratic election for the first time. And people would walk 10 miles from their village to go get that ink stamp, right, to show that they voted. And at the risk of being killed while they're standing in line or having their finger or their hand cut off by the time they get back to the village, and they show up in droves, right? 70, 80, 90% turnout because they finally get to freely elect their leader. And here we are on this stage, right? The most democratic country in the world, arguably, and we're lucky if we get 50%, right? And we would just talk about these things. And I think over the years, we talked about, my God, if they could just, in Kenya, with M-Pesa, a lot of them have smartphones. If they could just vote from their village, right? There's zero physical risk of violence or death. And so I think it was all these things kind of coming together at one time into these 2 words at this conference of mobile voting. And that kind of kicked off my legacy. And this is truly my legacy. I want to go out as being the guy that brings mobile voting to the world. That's how I'm committed to them.
Fantastic. I love it. I love it. Well, Pete, what is your superpower?
What is my superpower? So I think ideally my superpower would be if I could go back in time and actually spend some time with people that are no longer living. I would love to spend the day with Nelson Mandela. What an amazing, amazing man. And Leonardo da Vinci and Teddy Roosevelt. And, not that there are, current modern day folks that I wouldn't like to spend some time with, but I can, right? Those are just some people that for lots of different characteristics and attributes, I would love to just spend some time with them. So if I could go back in time and talk to dead people, I guess that would be my superpower.
That would be a great superpower. Well, Pete, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Before you go, would you take just a minute and tell people how they can learn more about Votem and connect with you personally?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Devin. So you can get me at Votem Pete, V-O-T-E-M, Pete on Twitter. At Votem is our Twitter account for the company. And if somebody wants to send me an email, they're welcome to do that. And I'm at pmartin at votem.com.
Fantastic. Well, Pete, again, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and wish you every success in achieving your goal of global voting. Thanks a lot, Devin. I really appreciate it. And thanks to your audience for watching us. All righty. Let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is available at youtube.com/Devin Thorpe. Subscribe to this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes by searching for Your Mark on the World. Every weekday, Devin hosts a CEO, celebrity, entrepreneur, or other changemaker here on the Your Mark on the World show to inspire and prepare you to make your mark. Devin is a champion of social good, writing about, advocating for, and advising people who are doing good. He is a Forbes contributor who is a recognized thought leader in social entrepreneurship, impact investing, and crowdfunding. To book Devin as a speaker, visit devinthorpe.com.